Hello, everyone. My name's Ryan. This is the Unnamed Sports Show, and today we fix college football. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down in the comment section. Also, follow us on our social media at Unnamed Sports S. You can find us on basically all the social media platforms. The whole reason for this video, normally for those that have watched before, we do a live video every Thursday at 7:30, so keep tuning into that. But this has been on my mind for the last 8 months, since December of last year. This whole idea of fixing college football. I don't think it's an easy fix. I think it's a structural fix. I think the way the NCAA is set up right now, it's set up for failure with how the times have been changing, with the bringing in of the NIL, with the bringing in of the transfer portal, and I'm sure there's better ways to phrase that. But with both of those now becoming mainstays in college football and in this sport that we all love, the system that was in place beforehand just isn't built to handle that. And so at the end of the day, it needs to be a complete restructure. And when I started thinking about this, and I've pulled a lot of the ideas that I'm going to discuss in this video from other major voices in the sport like Josh Pate, Joel Klatt, who have also uh, diagnosed a lot of the issues that we have with this sport and have given their own ways that they would fix it. For me, I think it requires a complete and total restructure, top to bottom. And like I was saying, as I started kind of exploring this idea, as I would dig one layer deeper, I was like, well, in order to fix that, you got to fix this. And then in order to fix that, you got to fix this. Oh, well, now we're left with this problem. And when you get that deep, you just say, you know what? It needs to just be a start over restructure. But I think if you do that and if people can buy into that, you can set up a system that is built to last, that is built to deal with the changing times. And I think that you can just look around at other sports that we all tune into, the NBA, MLB, hockey, NFL, obviously, uh, and see the way that a lot of these organizations have set themselves up. You know, obviously the NFL has changed from today going back 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, but the way that the NFL is set up, it can deal with those changes. The NCAA, it does not. And I do have a script here, so maybe I should stick to that before I just start rambling. But just kind of laying it out. The purpose of this video, it's been sitting. It's been something that I kind of have taken on as like a passion project, but it's developed into more of that. Where I think, um, I've put something together that could legitimately really help college football moving forward. And obviously, it's not a rigid document or rigid system or rigid, oh, it has to be this way. But I think a lot of the ideas in here are ones that can at least get the conversation going and getting uh moving in a direction that could, I think, really set college football up here and into the future. So starting off, why, right? Why is this necessary? Well, first and foremost, I love college football. I grew up 30 minutes from Columbus. My grandparents had season tickets to the Buckeyes, to the Buckeye games. And so I grew up watching Ohio State. I grew up going to at least 1 to 2 games a year. And so I love college football. There's nothing like, games in the horseshoe, 105,000 people on their feet, yelling, screaming. And I know anyone that's ever been to really any of those high level program college football games understand what that's like, whether it's Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, ACC. College football just, it means so much to a lot of people. And so obviously, if I didn't care about it, I wouldn't put the time and energy that I've put into this to try and fix it. So that's first and foremost. Uh, I think if you dig down to the root of the problem, why is college football broken? I think it stems from a lack of centralized governance. Think, for any of you history dorks like me, think Articles of Confederation, right?
Can we get back on track here?
Such a lack of centralized power that the the NCAA, the governing body, has no teeth. I mean, look no further than the Sorsby situation, where some judge in Lubbock can just say, "Oh yeah, he can play," and yeah, it was appealed, but why does the NCAA, after giving a ruling, have to keep continuing to appeal its own ruling and have its ruling stayed, or the potential for a stay from a judge? How does the NCAA not have the authority to ban players from its own league? That doesn't make any sense to me. So, again, the framework of the NCAA, and this stems from the NCAA constantly kicking the can down the road when it comes to making decisions. And so it has thrust the responsibility of the decision making upon the schools and the conferences. And the NCAA just goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, like we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out." Well, it's time to figure it out. I think if you look at the NIL, there's zero framework for which NIL and collectives can be used. Again, NIL originally was supposed to be name, image, and likeness. You should be able to profit off the name on the back of your jersey, right? Well, now it's come to these schools setting up these collectives where people can just donate money. It goes into this big pool of money, and then that school can pay players out of that big pool. It's completely unregulated, and I know there's some action going on. I know there's some there's some laws that are trying to be put in place to set up these guardrails, but truthfully, it should be in house, right? This shouldn't be in the hands of the federal government. This should be in the hands of college football, right? Who best to guide college football than the decision makers in college football? We just need the right people in the right places, and we'll get into that structure. The schedule is a nightmare, right? We're ending on the third week. We're pushing into the NFL season, right? Which obviously I'm a massive NFL fan as well. Um, but ending at the end of January is it's wrong on many levels, but also just a lot of times I feel like like the Super Bowl, right? It's this event that's built up to everyone watches Super Bowl Sunday. I feel like the national championship is not something that is this big culminated event that you can go watch. And I know there are other people that share this sentiment. I think Joel Klatt in one of his videos from last year really talked about this. And I stole some of his ideas and what I would want to do to restructure college football. The transfer window, I'm glad that it's been moved down to a single window versus two, but it's in the middle of the playoffs. So if you're a playoff team, you are automatically at a disadvantage when it comes to trying to get players to transfer in. I mean, yeah, you're a premier program, but how much time do these coaches have to really spend, going after certain players, and how much of that time spent going after players is now not being spent trying to win football games, which is what's the most important thing uh, during the playoffs in college football. Um, tra- the transfer portal. Speaking of that, it's unlimited. This is You can transfer as many times as you want. You can collect that NIL check as many times as you want, and now we have a lot of players electing to stay in college football instead of going to the NFL because they can just collect another NIL check that would be larger than maybe a third, fourth, fifth round contract would be in the NFL. And I don't think that's all bad. I think a lot of that is good because you keep the competitive level at the competitive level in college very high by keeping some of these people around instead of just being three and out, like you kind of used to be there for a little bit. But I think on the other side, you have people that are looking to just get that next paycheck, and that's available. And I love that these college athletes are getting paid. They should be getting paid. They should have been getting paid for a long time. It's that if you just keep in the NFL, right? These guys get paid, but they sign a contract. They have to stay at a certain place for a certain amount of time. They could get cut. Obviously, uh, there are ways that you can get in and out of these contracts, but to some degree, you get paid a certain amount for a certain amount of time, and you commit to that team. You do not have those same kind of rules in college football. Um, and again, this whole transfer NIL collective sentiment has allowed the football teams or the programs with the largest pockets, the deepest pockets, to have a massive advantage. I mean, and by the way, I'm an Ohio State fan, right? It's no, I'm no, I totally understand and see and reap the benefit as a fan of the fact Ohio State will go out and spend just as much as any other major blue blood program out there. Um, but at the same time, is that what we want? Is that what we want? These millions and millions of dollars getting spent by a few programs that will continue to just sit at the top of college football. I think the reason the NFL is king is because of parity. I think it's because of the old phrase, any given Sunday, right? The difference between the best team in college football, or I'm sorry, the best team in the NFL and the worst team in the NFL is such a smaller gap than say the best team in the Big 10 and like a middle team in the Big 10, right? Like that gap is significantly wider than the Browns and the Seahawks, right? So finding ways, obviously, you aren't gonna, you're not gonna be able to have North Dakota State. That's a bad example because they're actually a good program, but like Kent State compete with Alabama by next week. But the goal is to develop a system that creates more parity and also allows teams to ascend to a certain level. The way it's structured right now, a MAC team is never going to be a high level, high competing team for more than a year because their coach is just going to get poached. Their players are going to get poached, right? You just saw this with North Texas. Like, how do we incentivize players to stay? And how do we incentivize coaches to stay and allow programs to grow? And I address that uh, here later on. Again, this is just kind of going over the why. Why is this necessary? uh, you know, Conferences right now, they wield too much authority, specifically the Big Ten and the SEC. They basically are in the driver's seat for where college football is going. And, it's no fault of the SEC or Big Ten. They're going to do what's best for the SEC and the Big Ten. But this will lead to automatic conference bids and certain conferences getting more bids than other conferences, right? You have these ideas for the playoffs where the SEC and the Big Ten both get four automatic bids, and then the scraps will be given to the rest. And I don't, even as a fan of a Big Ten team, I don't think that is a reasonable way to set up your playoff system. And these conferences also negotiate their own TV deals. Now I understand that there is some of that in the NFL, but I think that college football as a whole should be under one umbrella, Division 1 college football as a whole. And I'll get into this whole structure here, but college football as a whole should negotiate as a whole, right? We saw the decimation of the Pac 12, this historic conference, the Pac 10, and then eventually the Pac 12, get completely gutted and ripped apart because they couldn't secure a media distribution deal or basically TV deal. That is ridiculous to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, watching Ohio State and Oregon play is great. I love that, but the fact that this conference was completely decimated, ripped apart because these teams weren't getting the distribution from being a part of these TV network deals that the teams in the Big Ten and the SEC were getting. It's the same reason Texas and Oklahoma, right? You think Texas and Oklahoma, you think SEC? Come on. But now you can watch the Red River Shootout, and that's on the SEC network, right? That doesn't make it that just doesn't make any sense. It's not set up right, and it's really just ways to chase money, which I can't blame the schools for doing. You got to do what you got to do, but why don't we set up a system that these schools can be rewarded monetarily without having to, without having Rutgers play UCLA, right? Um, Again, within these conferences, because they wield so much individual authority and autonomy over their own teams, they can just pick however many conference games they want to do. The SEC's scheduling St. Mary's School for the Blind on week 8, basically as a built-in bye week. And this isn't trying to take a shot at SEC, but they play 8 conference games versus some of these other conferences that play 9. That is a big deal. That's a big deal for being able to distinguish who should and shouldn't make the playoffs. It's a big deal when it comes to getting basically an additional bye week in the middle of your season. So I think all of that's important to take into consideration. I think there needs to be uniformity across the sport. When you get to the playoff situation, this total lack of structure, right? This just conference led, do whatever you want to do. This lack of structure has led to people sitting in a room, committees sitting in a room, deciding, hey, I think these teams are top 12. Yeah, you agree? Okay, yeah. And then, they close the door, they lock the door. Like the Pope, you wait till the white smoke comes out, and then they say, here's our 12 teams. And that's not an appropriate way, in my opinion, to choose who is going to have an opportunity to represent the national champion for college football. A bunch of dudes sitting in a room coming up with 12 teams. And by the way, SEC complains they don't get enough. Big Ten complains they don't get enough. Okay, well, let's go to 16 teams. Okay, let's go to 24 teams. Oh, well, let's just 64 teams. Well, how about we just make it a single elimination tournament starting at the beginning of the season? Last team left standing wins it all, right? It just, obviously I'm being facetious and hyperbolic, but it just doesn't make sense that you would structure it that way. And I think lastly, and I think this is something that getting away just from the structure of the NCAA and the structure of the sport itself, not every game matters, right? Like, even for some of these upper tier programs, if you are basically out of the race, out of the hunt for a playoff position, doesn't matter. Your season's over, right? So how do we develop and create a system where more games matter? You want to get to a point where all games matter, but more games matter. Games matter down the stretch. It matters what happens. Every game is important. And I think that I have, with obviously taking ideas and inspirations from all over the place, developed a pretty intricate and deep structure for how this could work. So here's my proposal. For league structure, right? We'll start here. We get rid of the distinction between FBS and FCS. All Division I college will fall under this structure. That's 265 Division I programs. That was kind of how I extended it out. I think I would be open to maybe just starting with the 150 FBS schools. That actually fits into the structure that I've created a little bit easier. But it would be, I think, good for the sport and good for, and you'll see why, but good for a lot of young men who want to play college football or want to go to college. I think this structure sets it up so that there is more opportunity for more people. So all 265 Division I programs organized into 5 geographical regions. Interesting 5, you say, almost like there was a Power 5 conference. That's where we're going. Each of these geographical regions, or each of these 5 umbrella conferences, will have 5 competitive tiers within them. Tier 1 being the best, tier 5 being the worst. Within each tier, there will be in tier 1, all 5 conferences will have 10 teams, right? So 50 total teams across all tier 1. Tier 2, same setup. 10 teams, 5 tiers. And again, these tiers on the horizontal level, tier 2, but they also go vertically, right? So you have the Big Ten. In this scenario, you would have the Big Ten, the SEC, the Pac-10, the ACC, and instead of the Big 12, go back to the old Southwestern Conference. And within all of these conferences, you also have 5 tiers down. The third tier, again, 50 total teams, 10 teams per conference. Then, when as you're adding in these FCS schools, because there's 265, it doesn't go like 50, 50 times 5, right? You can't, there isn't, there's more teams than 250, which would be 50 per tier. So tier 4 and tier 5 have a couple more teams, but the top 3 tiers, 50 teams per tier, and then 57 teams in tier 4 and 58 teams in tier 5. And let me show a picture here of what this would look like. One moment, bear with me here.
Well, we're waiting.
Right here. Okay, so if you look here at the Big Ten, you have, and let's see if I can pull up. There we go. So you have the Big Ten, and then within the Big Ten, you have the Tier 1 teams, which are the best teams in the Big Ten, right? Tier 2s. And the G5, I added the G5 teams because they kind of all map to a larger Power 5. All of them kind of map to that pretty well. But after that, you're going into some of the other conferences or the FCS conferences. I don't know those as well, and so I kind of just left it as tier 3, tier 4, tier 5. But basically, what you got is, if you just look here at the Big Ten, this is the whole Big Ten, right? In the Big Ten, there are approximately 50. What is it? 10, 20, 30. 41, 43, 53. There's approximately, sorry, guys. Within the Big Ten, there's approximately 53 total teams, right? You got 10 teams in tier 1, 10 teams in tier 2, 10 teams in tier 3, 11 teams in tier 4, and 12 teams in tier 5. Those aren't the exact numbers, but that's basically what you have. And that's done for all 5 of your main conferences, right? So this is kind of the basic structure, and we'll go more over this here in a minute. So that's our basic structure, right? 5 conferences, 5 tiers per conference. Every team fits into one of those. That means Notre Dame, you're part of a conference. The initial placement, this will have to be done one time, right? Because one, we're shifting stuff back geographically. We're moving stuff, right? There's no reason why Maryland should be playing USC on as a conference game. That makes no sense. So we're not doing that anymore. Everything's going to be based relatively geographically. I did what I think is a pretty solid job of separating this out. If this is something that actually takes off, obviously, there is room for movement, room for maneuvering, but this is what I came up with. So all the teams are placed geographically. Then what we do is there isn't just some subjective placement, right? We don't want to just just like the committee did. Oh, get in a room. I think this person should be here. This team should be tier 1. This team should be tier 2. No, we use kind of the BCS style, some sort of aggregate computer ranking. And what I used was Massey's because they Massey's ranking automatically includes the all the FCS schools with it. So I went back 5 years and I weighted each year, the most recent year being weighted the heaviest, but the furthest year also having an input, and you come up with an aggregate ranking. So here's the aggregate rankings. Okay, so I pulled up the aggregate rating. So this is the ratings on the Massey website over the last 5 years. As you can see, all 265 teams. And then that rating is multiplied 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is multiplied by 5, that by 4, 3, 2, 1, and then averaged out. So this is the aggregate rating. So this is the overall right here, the ratings of all the teams 1 to 265 using that method. This is obviously also subject to change, but this is the way that I used it to come up with this. Again, this structure can be somewhat flexible in terms of how you rate them, but basically once you have them rated and you have all the teams separated by the 5 geographical locations, the 5 major umbrella conferences, then it becomes super easy. You just realign them based on location. So again, Big Ten's like the Midwest, SEC obviously Southeast, ACC East Coast, Southwest, kind of to, just West, and then the Pac-10's kind of the Northwest to West Coast. And so of just using those aggregate rankings, this right here would be the tier 1 major Big Ten teams, right? And then the MAC, or the tier 2, or however you want to name it, the Midwest tier 2 teams, right? These are your tier 2 teams, and so on and so forth. And that has been done for the SEC, the ACC, Southwest, and the Pac-10. So this is the entire realignment. We'll get to those other tabs here in a minute, but that is how we would realign these conferences. That's how we would make this. That's how we would start, right? This is how we set up moving forward, the structure for moving forward. You have these 5 umbrella conferences, 5 tiers per conference, around 10 teams per tier. And then you add what I think is my favorite part of this, and I think it is the engine that allows for several of the other things that we're able to do in this structure, and that's the promotion and relegation. In great fashion, we just had the FIFA World Cup. So this is something the Premier League does. This is kind of a soccer thing, if you will. But basically, at the end of every season, the bottom 2 teams in every tier get relegated, except for the tier 5, right? You can't get relegated below that. And the top 2 teams get promoted. So that would mean, if you take a look here, let's say, just for sake of the argument, based on aggregate rating, Michigan State and Minnesota do the worst, and Cincinnati and Northwestern do the best. The following year, Cincinnati and Northwestern are now in that tier 1, and Michigan and Minnesota are in the tier 2 or the MAC, or however it gets set up. And this obviously is the same. It goes across the board for all 5 of the umbrella conferences. And the reason that you want to have this relegation promotion system is because, again, we want to encourage, or at least my thought is, you want to encourage players and coaches to stay at their program, right? You don't want this constant bouncing around where they can just end up at one of the 20 top programs in the country and those stay the top 20 programs. How do we incentivize, and how do we create a system where you can embrace going to, I went to OU. I didn't play football, but I went to OU, right? You can embrace going to OU, and in 4 years, you get promoted to the Tier 1 Big Ten, right? That's a big deal. Now your games are being played you're going to Michigan this week, and you're going to Ohio State next week, and you're going to Iowa the week after, right? Like all of these systems set up so that you can move up, you can increase the level of competition that you're playing, and and this also trickles down, and you'll see this later, but into the financials, right? You move into that tier 1, obviously it makes more sense. That's where the eyeballs are going, that's who people are watching. You make more money in your redistribution on the TV contracts. So this sets up again a system where one team can eventually make it to that top level, and I think it's much easier it's not easy obviously, but it's much more incentivized for coaches, players, everyone to stay at your program, and you might get more money from your own program next year if you're able to get promoted. um, the next thing is scheduling. So the reason I did 10 teams, we're going to do 9 conference games for everybody. And there's 10 teams in those top 3 tiers per conference. So you play everyone in your conference. There's no point in having 37 teams in a conference for you to play 8 of them and then say, oh, yeah, I went 8. No more of oh, you got the easy conference schedule, you got the hard conference schedule. No, you play everybody. This also means there'll be no more conference championship games, which some people might, you know, that might be frustrating for some, but if we're already going to have these kids play 12 weeks and then we're going to have them play a playoff, adding another conference championship game, oftentimes that can hurt you, right? If you're like, say, Alabama, and your 4th loss comes in the conference championship game, right? That's kind of silly. And we'll get into the playoffs here later, but the point being, you've already played everyone in your conference. So if you're the conference champion, you've earned the best record in the conference, and you've played everybody, right? That's why it's limited to 10 teams. That's why it's 9 conference games. From a uh, so again, it's a 12-game regular season. 9 of them are conference games, which means you have 3 out of conference games. 2 of those are rotating interregional games. So this is borrowed directly from the NFL, right? What you'll do is so the Big Ten, let's say the tier 1, but this will go through all 5 tiers. The Big Ten, their 2 out of conference games are against the SEC and the Southwestern Conference, let's say. And you will play the team that finished at the same level in their conference as you did. Again, there's 10 teams in the conference, or in that tier in the conference. And so you finished 4th last year, you'll play the 4th placed SEC team, and you'll play the 4th placed Southwestern Conference team, tier 1 team, and so on and so forth, right? So this sets up marquee matchups. You're going to have Georgia playing Ohio State. You're going to have Oregon, which I don't know if you saw when I pulled it up. They're back in the Pac-10 where they should be. They could be playing Texas week 1, right? Who's in the Southwestern Conference where they should be. Oklahoma against Penn State, which has now been moved back to the ACC, where they belong, out on the East Coast, right? So you set up these marquee matchups. But again, and we'll get to this in the playoffs, this actually it sets up great competition at the beginning of the season, but your entrance into the playoffs will be based on your conference record, based on your placement in your own conference, I should say. And so these out of conference games, they don't necessarily impact they won't impact obviously your conference record. At the same time, they do mean something, because the conference at the end of the season the conference, or at the these will likely all be played at the beginning of the season, but at the end of the season, the conference that has the most out of conference wins of these two, right? These two scheduled out of conference games, the conference with the most wins will get a additional team added into the playoffs. And so I'll go over that when we go into the playoff section. But it means that these games are important, right? You want to win. But also, you if you lose that game, it's not like your season's over, right? You have plenty of opportunity to still make it to the playoffs. So I think it's a perfect mix of having competitive out of conference games at the beginning of the season without ruining your chances for making it to the playoffs. And then your last game is preserved for the team, and really this was to preserve out of conference rivalry matchups. So in this scenario, like USC Notre Dame will be in the Big Ten, USC will be in the Pac-10, or in those regional areas. But if they want to play each other every year, we preserve one game, and that won't count towards your out of conference record, right? The out of conference record is strictly the two games where everyone in the Big Ten will play everyone in X conference, right? So on and so forth. Um, from a from a scheduling perspective, as far as where the season starts and ends, where we would start the second, and this is pulled directly from Joel Klatt, so that's all him. But I think this is an incredible idea, and so in the system that I put together, this is we're going to do the same thing. We're going to open the season with Army versus Navy, and we're going to play that the second week of August, and then the season will culminate on New Year's Day in the Rose Bowl, right? The best of all the bowl games. Uh, every year that will be the national championship game, and it'll be played on New Year's Day, and that's when the season ends, right? All of that could be fit from the second week of August to January 1st, and I think that sets up that is the perfect timing. And now your transfer window, you don't even have to change it. It's right after the season ends, and nobody's getting caught up in, oh, I'm trying to prep for a game, and now I'm trying to have to worry about the transfer portal. So that's scheduling. The playoffs, right? So the national champion will go to the tier one champion, but the playoffs will be played throughout all the tiers, and it will be set up the same way, excluding the bowl aspect of it, right? So you're going to have like the Rose Bowl as a national championship. That's not going to serve as the tier two championship game. That can be to be determined. I think maybe some of those other bowls can bid for that position, or maybe we rotate it or something like that. But I think that there's some possibility for a couple different things there. But all tiers will have a playoff structure set up in this way. So it'll be a 16 team model. The top three teams from each conference make the playoffs. And then, as I was saying, so that's 15 teams. Your 16th team, that's the fourth team from the conference that won the most of the conference matchup games, that had the best record. And there'll be tiebreakers set up within that, whether that be point differential or what have you. But that conference, right? So the SEC says, hey, we deserve the most teams every year. Well, they'll have that opportunity to go out and prove it, and they can have that fourth team. So that sets the field at 16 teams. Seating will be so no more committees. We're not having anyone sit in a room and send up the smoke that this is what they've come up with. Seating will be done like the old BCS style. It'd be computer ranking, and people won't have as much a problem with it. I mean, I'm sure people will still have a problem, but they won't have as much a problem with it because if you're going to make it or you're not going to make it, right? The reason when people getting upset is because you have some random people in a room deciding who does and doesn't make it to the playoffs. In this scenario, if you made it or not. It just is determining who you're going to play. So, I think there'll be less complaints about that. First two rounds of the playoffs will be on college campuses. Excuse me, college campuses, and then the semifinals will be the remaining New Year's Six bowls rotating. Now, obviously, they won't be played on New Year's Eve; they'll be played earlier. But it'll be those six that are on rotation for the two. Or I should say five, because the Rose Bowl will be the national championship. So those five on rotation to hold the the semifinals, and then the national championship played January 1st at the Rose Bowl. For the lower tiers, relegation and promotion is based solely on conference record. So, you know, there will be a scenario in which, the third place conference team makes to the playoffs. If they end up winning it, uh, they still wouldn't get promoted in that scenario, because it's based solely on being the top two at the end of the regular season, the top two finishers in that conference. And the bowl games will still exist. Uh, they will no longer have like those conference ties. It'll just be those bowls will be able to bid out for teams that aren't involved in the playoffs. And I think there's a scenario in which those bowls could pick up some of the playoff games for the lower tier, but still would be quality football games. Those lower tier playoffs. And then um, as far as those lower tier playoffs, I'd be open to different ideas to incentivize or reward those games, because obviously you want them to be competitive, like they're tier two, tier three, tier four, but you still want them to be competitive, but it's not going to affect their promotion to the tier above. Likely they'll probably be promoted, but they may not be. So I'm open to different ideas to incentivize those teams or to reward those teams for making the playoffs. The next portion of it um, is the finances. So let's start with distribution, right? That's what is going to be most important. And right now, the Big Ten leads everyone in their and what they distribute based on their TV contract. And I think in the model that I have set up, the Big Ten, like those lower tier Big Ten teams, are going to be the only ones that would be frustrated with this model, because it would be a significant cut if they get put into that tier two. But basically, your distribution is reliant on where your uh, what tier you're in, and everyone in that tier gets the same amount of money distributed. So if you look here, let's go to the financials. So this is the projected total to be distributed from the TV contracts, which is right in that, it's like 5.3 billion. This is based on the contracts that I've been able to look up, as well as um, projected uh, revenue increase, or the projected increase over the next year or two. So this number may be incorrect. I don't know 100%. Obviously, I'm not privy to a lot of these numbers, but this was what I came up with: $5.375 billion for redistribution. The tier one teams would get 3 billion of that, so that ends up being 60 million per team. Other than the Big Ten, I believe that pays out more than every single other major conference. Tier two teams would get 1.5 billion, which ends up being 30 million. Now, if you look at some of those tier two teams, like a Northwestern or a Minnesota, right, they're used to getting significantly more than that. But then if you look at some of the other tier two teams, like say Tulane or a JMU or something like that, which JMU might even be in that tier one based on how well they did this previous season. But you know what I'm talking about, like the American League, the Sun Belt. Teams in that realm are not used to getting anything close to this, right? So this allows some flexibility to really invest in your program and invest in your school, right? So that's kind of why I made this distribution the way that I did. The tier three teams, 500 million, which equates to about 10 million per school. Again, if you look at a lot of the tier 3 teams, a lot of it's a mixture of low uh, G5 teams and upper tier FCS schools. $10 million from a media distribution to an FCS school is significantly more than they're getting right now. Tier 4, you have 250 million. With 4 million to be distributed per school, and then tier 5, 125 million with 2 million to be distributed per school. Again, this is down here. I think this is where a lot of the opportunity of this system comes into play, because a lot of these lower FCS schools, they don't even offer athletic scholarship. So in this, every school would be required to offer athletic scholarships, but you're also getting 2 million in redistribution, 4 million in redistribution. I think that's important because it allows more opportunity for kids to get an education uh, that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been able to, because of this ability to invest in your program, to have to be able to offer these scholarships. Um, and so that's why there's a good chunk of change that are going down to these, lower 115 teams. So that's how the distribution method would be set up.
Several days later.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. Sorry, I had to take a break there. I couldn't do it all in one sitting. You can see, change of clothes, same hat, but we'll keep marching right along. So when we stopped, we had just finished talking about media distribution and what each tier and each team in each tier would get distributed. Next, I want to talk about these NIL collectives that these teams have been using. And these top level teams are spending tens of millions of dollars on these players. And I think the best solution is to institute a soft salary cap. So you can see, excuse me, I'm sorry. And let me start by saying all of these can be recalibrated, restructured. And ideally, and I'll get a little bit into this when I talk about the governance, but ideally, you would negotiate this with some sort of, you would have a collective bargaining agreement with the players. And these numbers are adjustable, but just from an idea standpoint, right? Let's say we set these NIL salary caps at the following. So tier 1, you're at 20 million. Tier 2, 12.5 million. Tier 3, 5 million. Tier 4, 2 million. Tier 5, 1 million. One, I think this helps to create some amount of parity across the league, especially in the spending. When you have teams, again, as you know, I'm a big Ohio State fan. When you have teams like Ohio State that are spending ridiculous sums of money in comparison to a team like, say, Maryland, right? It's just you're never on equal playing ground. So in this scenario, you would institute a soft NIL salary cap with a luxury tax. So the luxury tax is a way also to redistribute money down to these lower tiers, these tier 4, tier 5 programs, and maybe a little bit into the tier 3, but specifically tier 4 and tier 5 to help bolster those teams, and again pay for those scholarships that are required now, being a Division 1 or a Division 1 team in this restructure. I was about to say NCAA, but we're actually an NCFA, National College Football Association. But if you take a look at the numbers here, so you got 20 million, 12.5, 5 million, 2 million, and 1 million. And then the luxury tax is calculated on a parabolic graph, you could say. So as you continue to go past that salary cap, that determined salary cap number, your tax level increases at an exponential rate. So let's say we have a $20 million salary cap. Let's use this as an example. Ohio State decides to spend $30 million on their roster. Under this tax proposal, Ohio State would then be 10 million over the cap, because 20 million is the salary cap. That's a 50% increase over the cap, and so they would owe They would spend their 30 million, and then they would owe back to the National College Football Association. They would owe $7.5 million, and that money would then go into a collective pot from all the teams and all tiers that are paying over the salary cap, and then redistributed. And this is how the redistribution works. Tier 5 would receive 60% of all funds in there, Tier 4 30%, Tier 3 10%. And so this is what the payouts based on about 120 million calculated luxury tax total across all five tiers rather. That number is obviously taking a lot of making a lot of assumptions, and a lot of assumptions about information that I'm not privy to, right? So this is my estimation. I could be way off on this. I could be way undershooting it. I could be way overshooting it. But regardless, that doesn't really matter, because what I'm trying to show is that when we have this amount and we know teams will pay into that luxury tax, it's inevitable, right? You try to tell a team like Texas Tech or Ohio State or Oregon that they are going to be capped. Well, as long as you make it a soft cap, they will pay into that. There will be a luxury tax collected, and that money can then be redistributed amongst the lower tier teams to make sure that they have enough infrastructure to pay for instituting, full scholarships, right? Like, these aren't small things that we'd be asking under this model. But that's really everything in the financial that I have so far. Taking a quick pause, I just want to reemphasize that the ideas being discussed and that I'm bringing forward, none of these are set in stone. These are all up to, I'd love to have a conversation with any and all that see this and that have some interest in it. We all love the sport. We all want to fix it. I've put together a pretty comprehensive view of how we could together take this sport forward, but all of this is up to interpretation. A lot of the numbers specifically, I don't have all that access, so I can't make, I can only make an educated guess based on the information that I can get. So that's kind of where we're at in the financial department. A couple other things. Again, we'll have a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, that will ensure a certain portion of the distributed money has to go to player salaries, right? So we were making sure that these players are getting paid. And also, while there is a NIL, this is just like team collective salary cap, right? Players are still well within their rights to sell what truly NIL means, which is name, image, and likeness. They can go get their own brand deals. They can go, be in commercials for Dr. Pepper, right? Like, they can do whatever they want in that respect. But when we're talking about the collectives that these people are paying into, donors are paying into, that some of this money that is from the media rights deals will be redistributed into, that money, that collective will go directly towards paying the players as to be playing for the football team. Next, I want to talk about the transfer portal. So we've now have moved into a single transfer portal window, which I think is great. A lot of people have been complaining about that, but the problem is the transfer portal window now is in the middle of playoffs, which is ridiculous. So these top tier teams, how do you go out and go get these transfer players when you're supposed to be focused on your opponent next week? So under this model, again, borrowing the schedule Joel Klatt said like a year ago, on ending the season on January 1st, you keep the current transfer portal as one transfer portal window, exactly where it is, right? So now it's perfectly placed. You don't have to do anything with that. But here's the big caveat, and I think I stole this as well, but again, this is an amalgamation of as many ideas as we can put together to really rehaul the sport. A player can only transfer twice, right? And so this stops a couple things. It stops from having to create this true contract that you sign where you're, okay, I commit to play 3 years for this school for this amount of money, right? I don't think we really want that. but it also stops players from transferring every single year to just collect the biggest possible check. If you're going to transfer, it's got to be an important decision. And obviously, it can be for a financial decision. And I think under this model, you offer teams that generally would not have the finances to keep a lot of these players, you offer them the ability to have that, but then we also curb the constant transferring by making a 2 transfer limit. So players benefit because these teams will have more disposable income to spend. They'll be able to collect that money sooner, which is, I think, great for the players. But also, we have these teams don't have to scramble every single year to retool a roster completely every single year because everyone's transferring in and out, and you're just kind of trying to juggle with the pieces. So, again, give people the chance to transfer. You're also giving teams the ability to pay players more. And I think it's a win-win. The last kind of portion here I want to talk about is governance. And I think overall we'll create what's called the National College Football Association, the NCFA. You can call it whatever you want. Basically, you're separating from the NCAA. Football is becoming its own standalone thing. And for all these schools will remain in the NCAA for all their sports. This is strictly talking about football. And it's important because football is the main money draw for most of these universities, right? That is what's funding a lot of this stuff. And there's a lot of money, I think, that's being left on the table. I think there's an opportunity here for these schools to make more money, but also create a environment in sport that is more watchable all year long, more important games, more better stakes, right? That's kind of let's make this as competitive as the NFL, right? The NFL dominates. Why does the NFL dominate? Well, it dominates because any given Sunday, every game is important. It's the parity is at a much more equal level, and the games all matter. Every game is important, right? So this sets up a scenario in which every game is important, and uh, and your parity levels are similar. And on top of that, what is king for sports across the world? Well, that is soccer. We are borrowing some ideals and a setup from the Premier League, and that wins across the board for international views, right? So we are pulling what works from multiple different sports into one cohesive way to move forward. And so again, we get back into the governance of this, or the NCFA, whatever you want to call it. You have the Office of the Commissioner. That's your Roger Goodell. That's your Adam Silver, right? You're responsible for the day-to-day operations, sort of to some degree, right? Like you're making sure the vision's right moving forward. You're the figurehead. Your responsibilities are to make sure that all rules that are set forth are adhered to. Then you have a board of governors. My idea for this was basically just that one representative from each conference from each tier, right? So Big Ten Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4, Tier 5, right? So the Big Ten has 5, SEC has 5, Southwest, and so on and so forth. Pac-10 has 5. One representative from each conference, from each tier, and that would make up 25 voting members. And their responsibilities would be to elect the commissioner, to approve any sort of constitutional changes that are made once it's set up, and ratify the collective bargaining agreement. And then the other one I had is a promotion and relegation committee. So their entire goal would be to set up the tiebreakers, right, that exist on the promotion and relegation side, and then ratify those teams in their schedules when they move up and or down. And there's obviously other offices that will exist. There'll be a rules committee. I'm sure there'll be, I am not integrated enough to be able to tell you every single office. And that's really not what we're here for. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is to get the ball moving in the right direction. And, I think setting up a governance body like this allows you the flexibility and opportunity, and having a single person leading the direction that will set football up for success for a long time in the future. And I think if we can agree on anything, it's that we need a commissioner for college football. We need somebody to lead the way. And so, that pretty much wraps up everything. I know this has been a pretty long video. I appreciate anyone that stuck through to the end. I think if I was going to sum everything up, obviously nothing in here is non-changeable, right? I think this sets up a conversation to discuss a framework for how college football can operate moving forward. But I think an idea of having your 5 power conferences tier all the way down across all Division 1 football and have an ability within that conference to promote and relegate every single year, you give players more flexibility to play in important games. You give these universities and these programs more opportunity to make more money, and obviously, like that's important to these schools. They need to make sure they can still fund the university, and so we can't ignore that when we set up these frameworks. But it gives these players an opportunity to make money too, and I think from a competitive portion, from a fan perspective, this makes it so every game is important. And your matchups, especially at that tier 1 level, but even at the tier 2 level, are going to be electric. You're going to be having Texas versus Oregon. You're going to be having USC versus Alabama, like these marquee matchups every year at the beginning of the season. And then within conference, right? You're not going to have the SEC schedule or the Big Ten schedule where you duck Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon, right? You have to play all of them in order to win your conference. That sets up an opportunity for one. I mean, you're talking about like the most watched games, right? Why do you think the Eagles and Cowboys are watched all the time? Why do you think, even as a Browns fan, Browns and the Arizona Cardinals, that's going to be a highly watched game that's going to do really good numbers? It's because even though those are considered lower programs in the NFL, there's a level of excellence and parity at that level that is going to draw attention, and you're going to get the same thing across college football under this scenario. So again, I really appreciate any you guys, your comments, or dislike this video. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what we can edit or fix, or tell me why my numbers are way off. Like, this is something I've put together over the last couple months, and it's been really fun to do. It's been a really good time, like, going through all this, but overall, I think it offers at least a stepping stone for a framework that could really work for college football. I think um, that we need to figure something out that is going to help maintain the relevancy of the sport. And also, we're not getting away from, or I'm sorry, we're getting away from these lack of guardrails, this kind of just wild west that we have right now in college football. So let us know your thoughts. Don't forget, like, subscribe, watch us on Thursday. Thursdays at 7:30. Actually, this upcoming Thursday, August, I want to say, what would that be, the 6th? I can't do quick math. Bear with me. Yeah. Oh, I'm so good. August 6th, we'll be discussing this specifically. So we really appreciate you guys joining. Again, it's a live show, so you can comment during. Again, come tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why. Tell me your ideas down in the comment section. I'd love to hear those, and maybe potentially there's a way to integrate these ideas to come up with the best possible solution. So thank you guys all again, and we'll see you next time.